Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the reading of the fic entitled Throw a Chair Through a Window and Call It a Day. Here's the summary. Nezu goes on a week-long business trip and makes Aizawa the temporary principal while he's gone, giving him all the powers a principal of UA would normally have. Aizawa, prepared to use this power to its full capacity, silently vows to make as many changes to UA as he can in a single week. He appoints Midoriya as his secretary for the time being, and together, they wreak havoc amongst the school, showing no mercy to any obstacle in their path, and maybe becoming father and son along the way. The rest of the staff and students are left to sit back and watch as everything they know goes up in flames. This fic is 120,000 words with 8 chapters. I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 1. It's a hobo. It's a hero. It's the temporary principal of UA. Shota let out a hot breath of air as he hid his face deeper into his capture weapon, long black hair curling around his head and shoulders in the process. Sure, his makeshift scarf provided at least some solace from the low temperature that came with early January, but it still wasn't enough to completely shield him from the cold. And the air conditioner in Nezu's office that kept blowing more air into his face certainly wasn't helping. He crossed his arms and sunk a little deeper into the plush green chair. It's only been a few minutes since he was called into Nezu's office, but he still doesn't know the reason why he's here in the first place. He'd never say it out loud to the mouse, bear, chimera. He'd never say it out loud to his boss, but for a genius with a quirk like High Spec, he made some pretty illogical decisions sometimes. It was currently 7:08 in the morning on a Monday, a time when he would usually be taking his pre-class nap, but instead, he's been dragged into this jasmine tea-smelling room to discuss God knows what. If he doesn't get at least 15 minutes of sleep before having to deal with his hell class, his mood will be even worse than it normally is, forcing everyone around him to deal with the fallout. And Nezu should know better than anyone that a person should never want to be caught in the crossfire between Shota and his sleep-deprived antics. The last time it happened, well, he won't go into too much detail, but let's just say that by 2:45, multiple glass windows had been shattered as a result of a chair barreling through them, and Vlad King ended up needing a few sessions with Hound Dog. Shota was still thinking about the traumatized look on Vlad's face when a clinking sound broke him out of his stupor. A cup of steaming Earl Grey tea was placed in front of him, along with a small plate of lavender shortbread cookies. His favorite. So Nezu's taking the bribery route today. Interesting. The underground hero narrowed his eyes as his boss hopped onto his chair, sitting directly across from him behind the desk. His boss took the time to straighten a stack of papers before finally speaking. "Aizawa-kun," Nezu chirped, nodding his head in greeting. Shota grunted in return. "I assume you're wondering why you were called in here today, right before you could take your morning nap." Oh, so he was aware of the risk he was taking. Good to know. Shota gave another grunt. "I suppose I've already wasted enough of your time, so I'll just get straight to the point. The Hero Commission called me yesterday afternoon, organizing a meeting with me tomorrow to discuss the funding and budget of UA with all its donors and alumni. Unfortunately, this event will be held in an off-site location outside of Musutafu, thereby requiring me to take an untimely business trip. Normally, this wouldn't be a cause for concern, but in this case, the event is a week-long matter due to a particularly stubborn hero, and I won't be able to look after UA until I return next Monday. Therefore—" Nezu trailed off, unsaid words still floating the cold air around them. But Shota didn't care. He didn't need to hear the rest of the Chimera's sentence to know exactly what he was implying, and that he sure as hell didn't like it. "No," Shota stated, not bothering with an explanation, because Nezu sure as hell didn't need one to understand either. "I truly do apologize for the inconvenience this may cause you and your students, but I really have run out of all other options," the rat stated, not looking apologetic in the slightest. "None of the other staff members would be a fit for the role of the temporary principal besides you, Aizawa-kun. No way in hell was he going to take over this job, even if it is just for a week. He's seen his boss on multiple occasions, typing at the speed of light on his computer as well as signing hundreds of forms and letters in a single day. There's no possible way for Aizawa to handle that workload, on top of his own lesson plans, teaching, and patrols." "Are you absolutely sure about that?" Shota pressed in a slightly pleading voice. "What about Mike?" "He would throw too many parties and nothing would ever get done." "Midnight?" "There would be too many sexual harassment lawsuits." "Fair enough. He still didn't know why she's allowed around teenagers." "Vlad? No, not him." Shota scowled. He would rather give up all his naps than live to see the day where Sekijiro Khan, of all people, became a superior. "Snipe?" The erasure hero was leaning forward, eyebrows furrowing as his hands gripped the arms of his chair so tight that his knuckles turned white. To anyone who paid close enough attention to details, it wasn't hard to sense the man's desperation for a way out. Unfortunately for him, the only one in this room who fit that description was Nezu, a well-known sadist that made Shota seem like some merciful Holy Spirit in comparison. Not emotionally available at the moment, as he is currently battling his romantic feelings for Kayama-san. Shota shot back down. For the love of God. As you can see, me appointing you as principal is the only logical decision available, Nezu said, eyes gleaming with ruthless satisfaction at the hero's suffering. Logical, Shota mentally sneered. How dare he throw his own words back at him? And that's not even the worst part, no. The worst part about all of this was that Nezu was completely and utterly right. He always was, and that's what Shota hates most about him. It's just... Shota sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. You've seen what happens when I miss a single nap. Do you really want to see what I'm like when I cut out over 3 more hours? Yue will feel his wrath, and burn to the ground, that's what'll happen. No, I do not, and we won't have to. With that, Nezu lifted a single piece of paper with his paws and slid it over the desk to Aizawa, whose eyes scanned over the contents of the page. This would be your new schedule this week, should you take my offer. Some things stay the same, but it's mostly a complete reorganization. You won't take this job because it would be too much to juggle on top of your hero patrols and teaching. His quirk is high-spec, not psychic. How does he always manage to know what people are thinking? It aggravated the underground hero to no end. But things can be arranged to lighten the load. Class 2A's heroics class would be merged with Class 2B, much like the joint training session you guys had last year, except for a week. Therefore, you would only need to manage your class during homeroom, and lesson plans and assignment grading would be left to someone else. Who? Shota dared to ask. Nezu's face broke out into a sinister smile that screamed tales of agony and pain. Vlad King. God freaking damn it. This was going to be too tempting. Nezu knew exactly what he was doing by assigning the work to Khan, but Shota refused to take the bait. Furthermore, your duties as a principal would differ from what I usually do. I may be miles away from the Musatafa district, but that will not prevent me from making the usual calls and sending out my usual emails. All you will need to do here is check up on other people's work and make sure that everything is business as usual. Sure, you might need to handle the disciplinary actions for students who get sent to this office, but I doubt that'll be too difficult for you. Okay, so maybe he was taking the bait. Shota's slowly crumbling resolve must have shown on his face, despite his best attempts for them not to, because suddenly Nezu became even more chipper than usual, as he began to cackle madly, tea spilling everywhere. He shivered. Is this what his students feel like when he flashes his logical ruse smirk at them? Wonderful. He feels dead inside. I'll inform the staff of the recent development and leave it up to them to tell their respective classes. In the meantime, I suggest you start preparing your new courses of action. Pardon? New courses of action, he grumbled out, words slightly muffled from underneath the scarf. This may be a temporary position, Aizawa-kun, but it still grants you all the powers I would usually have in the day-to-day affairs. For the time being, you are allowed to manage this school in all the ways you see fit, with little need to refer to your co-workers, or should I say inferiors. The heroics teacher microscopically perked up in his seat, a gleam of interest entering his charcoal-colored eyes. It was at times like these, when the attendants of UA High School were able to see the similarities between the grumpy underground hero and the evil genius that was Nezu. Both of them had signature smiles that could put the fear of God into anyone it was aimed at. Both of them would do whatever they needed to accomplish their goals, barreling through obstacles like a sadistic bulldozer. And most importantly, both of them could analyze words and situations with an inhuman amount of precision, calculating every possibility and loophole available to them. The last of which Shota was doing right now at this very moment. Nezu said he would be given all the powers and superiority that came with his new position, and he knew full well what that statement entailed. Question is, how far did Nezu expect him to take that power? How far could he take that power without getting fired and having his teaching and hero license revoked? He wasn't aware of what he was limited to, but that didn't mean he was going to outright ask the Chimera. Not asking questions means not getting an answer, but in this case, that answer could go against everything Shota was hoping to achieve with this new development. So he stayed silent. Now then, any more questions? Nezu hummed. Yes. Actually, I have 3. Nezu nodded his head, signaling for him to proceed. First off, when exactly are you leaving for your trip? Nezu checked his pocket watch. In exactly 16 minutes, 46 seconds, and 13 milliseconds, a car will arrive at the gates of UA to take me to the airport. Nezu held out his hand and gestured to the opposite side of the room, where a single miniature suitcase rested beside the door. As you can see, I'm already packed. Showed aside for the 15th time today. Of course, Nezu called him in here on short notice, already knowing that he would take the job offer. He chose to push down his irritation with his boss and continue. Second, is it too late to go back to sleep? Yes. Well, at least that's out of the way. Showed a pause before asking his next question. Depending on the rat's answer this week, could either be a lot easier or a lot harder. My hypothetical new courses of action would require a lot more time and effort than usual, but I'd like to get it done as quickly and efficiently as possible. Therefore, I'm thinking of taking someone on as a secretary of sorts to help out. God, he hopes this isn't the biggest mistake of his life. I'm assuming it didn't take you any longer than 2 minutes to arrange a new schedule for me. Would you be able to do the same for a student? Nezu grinned, baring his sharp teeth, and hovered his pen over a new blank sheet of paper. All I need is a name. Yeah, this was definitely the biggest mistake of his life. From the moment Izuku stepped into class, he knew something was wrong, but he seemed to be the only one that noticed it. He can't exactly blame the others, though. To the untrained eye, it looked completely normal. Ida was reprimanding his classmates as usual, chopping his hands up and down in frustration as they refused to get into their seats. Ashido, Sero, and Kaminari were throwing Vine references back at each other, pointedly ignoring Ida. Hagekure, Tsuyu, after much insistence he finally calls her that, and Uraraka were busy discussing the latest chapter in some shoujo manga. And Kirishima was retelling a manly story to Kachan with tears pouring down his cheeks as the explosive blonde's hand sparked in anger. Like he said, completely normal. But there was something off in the atmosphere of this room that he couldn't quite place his finger on. Izuku quickly made his way over to his chair, politely asking Mineta to not sit on his desk as he had been doing recently. He didn't want to be rude, he really didn't, but he'd rather shut it down now instead of seeing it become a habit before sitting down. The strange feeling still hadn't gone away. He had taken a head count and everyone was present in class today, so it couldn't be any of them. Did they have a test today in English, or was that last week? Was there homework he didn't know about? Oh God, he picked the wrong time to lose his planner. Usually he had no trouble remembering things, but this morning had him feeling all paranoid. Are the legs on the chair uneven? Is the temperature slightly colder than yesterday? God damn it, stupid Deku, shut the hell up! He flinched, silently apologizing to the blonde before sinking deeper into his seat. Kachan certainly got a lot calmer compared to middle school and their first year at UA, but old habits die hard. Or, in this case, old habits die after Kachan beats them to death with a stick slowly and painfully. His short-tempered classmates still couldn't stand the sound of his endless string of mutterings, or his obsessive note-taking in his hero analysis notebooks, or his face. He basically couldn't stand the concept of Izuku in general. Midoriya, a low voice said, and he perked up in his seat to face the culprit. You seem to be quite fidgety today. Is anything amiss with your spiritual aura? Izuku ignored the language used, far used to Tokiyami's antics by now. The green-haired teen gave a wobbly smile and sheepishly rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed to know that someone had noticed his odd behavior. Sorry about that, Tokiyami. Just one of those days, you know? For all Izuku knew, that could have been the truth, but even if it wasn't, he didn't want to make his friends worried by sharing his own unreasonable concerns. Thanks for asking, though. Tokiyami nodded, but still seemed unsatisfied with his answer. The silent consideration in his classmate's eyes seemed familiar, though. In fact, it reminded him a lot of Mr. Aizawa. Oh. Izuku whipped back around to face the front of the classroom, eyes scanning furiously over every little detail because this had to be it. This had to be what was bothering him all morning. He knew Kachan was giving him the side-eye, but Izuku couldn't seem to care right now. He had more important things to do than worry about whatever was bothering him now. Finally, his searching stopped as his gaze rested on his dry-eyed teacher, who was currently leaning against his podium and waiting for class to start, instead of in his signature yellow sleeping bag. For any other teacher, this would be considered normal, more than normal. But this isn't just any teacher. This is Aizawa-sensei, a man who cherishes peace and quiet above all else, perhaps even his own life, and second only to cats. Aizawa-sensei wouldn't dare not take advantage of spare time to get a quick nap in. After all, that's what he does every day. The one time he hadn't taken his morning nap was during their first year, the 22nd of April to be specific. The only reason Izuku even remembers the exact date is that he'd written down all of the events that transpired that day in hopes that it would never happen again. Honestly, he's never been more terrified of his teacher than he was during homeroom that day, and he thinks he can speak for everyone when he says that he does not want a repeat of that occasion. But just because he doesn't want it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Is this innocent Monday morning going to be as disastrous as the last one was? Should he start running to Nezu's office and call another window repairman? Or should he just head back home and pray that Aizawa-sensei's wrath is limited to a single building and not the entire district of Musutafu? Before Izuku could dwell on it any further, the school bell rang, and his classmates scattered into their seats. The ninth user of One for All made a silent prayer to whatever god was listening and waited for all hell to break loose. Class, his grumpy teacher began. Today's lesson will be a little different. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, he knew it! He had to warn the others, but how? Should he pass around a note, or would that be too obvious? Maybe he should try out some Morse code and pray that they know what SOS is. And that's because I won't be the one teaching it. Come again? He saw his classmates looking confused at the statement, and he couldn't help but relate. I won't be available during any other class besides homeroom, so you'll be doing joint training for the week with Lad King and Class 2B for heroics, he grumbled out, and Kirishima raised his hand. Hope you don't mind me asking, but why won't you be available? Apparently that was the wrong question to ask, because the nonchalant expression his teacher had on his face faded into something reluctant and pained. Usually, Aizawa-sensei wasn't this easy to read, so his answer must be something pretty serious. Maybe it was the reason why he skipped his nap. Izuku placed his hand on his chin, a habit he developed whenever he was deep in thought. I suppose it's better you ask now rather than find out later. What did that mean? Nezu's going on a week-long business trip with the Hero Commission and has asked that I take his place for the time being as principal. The underground hero spat that word out with so much loathing and disgust it made Izuku wonder what made him accept the job in the first place. However, this is Nezu that asked him to be principal, and it was foolish to think that there was ever another option besides yes. So, I won't have the time to teach you guys at the same time. In the middle of his mental rant, it finally occurred to Izuku. Aizawa-sensei was going to be principal. Principal. He saw Ashido's and Kaminari's eyes widen in fear, and had to agree. God have mercy on the poor souls that get sent to his office. Oh, and that reminds me. Izuku snapped out of it and looked back at the teacher, who just happened to be staring directly at him. The green-haired child flinched. Why was he looking at him? Oh my god, did he say that mercy part out loud? Is he going to be sent to his office now? He whipped his head around in every direction, trying to determine by his classmates' expressions if they had heard him. Midoriya, you're also excused from every other class besides homeroom. Huh? Lucky bastard? Mido, what? So manly. I knew the aura was off. Izuku froze, his brain short-circuiting just like Kaminari when he reaches his voltage limit. He was out of it enough for the only reply to come out of his mouth being, huh? Is this some sort of suspension? No, that couldn't be it, or else he'd be banned from everything. Aizawa-sensei shows no mercy, so what exactly was he being punished for? Nezu and I decided that as long as I'm principal, there needs to be someone who can keep pace and document everything that happens down. We've agreed that someone is now you. But, why, Nezu, notes, huh? Izuku spluttered, still not understanding a single thing that was being said, as he frantically waved his arms around. The only thing he could comprehend right now was his friends' incredulous looks, Uraraka especially, all directed at him. Nezu left 30 minutes ago, actually, Aizawa said, checking the clock on the wall. And we need to get started right away, so it'd be appreciated if you could get a move on. Like hell. Why was he of all people chosen? Sure, he takes a lot of notes, quite obsessively, according to Uraraka, but quantity doesn't equal quality. Ida would be much better for the job. Momo, too. They are some of the top students, after all. And besides, his notes are limited to schoolwork and hero analysis, not whatever this is. How could they possibly expect him to do a good job on this when he has no experience in this topic? While Izuku was muttering, he didn't notice the gray capture weapon shooting toward him and curling around his torso, effectively picking him up out of his seat. He also didn't notice said capture weapon floating him out the door and down the hallway with Aizawa-sensei leading the way. He only became aware of his surroundings when he heard the sound of the door shutting behind him, and his feet making firm contact with the ground again. He looked up to see Aizawa-sensei staring down at him, hand outstretched toward him, holding a fresh notebook and a brand-new mechanical pencil. The kind of pencil you would stare at in a store but never be allowed to buy because, despite its good quality, the packaging was just too expensive for your shopping budget. Izuku stared at the items before reluctantly taking them inside. Why couldn't his teacher just throw a chair through a window and call it a day? Shota watched as his student took the items, seemingly resigned to his fate, and he accepted it a hell of a lot faster than the underground hero thought he would. Not that he's complaining, though. It would have been plenty inconvenient if Midoriya had refused the position. Not that he really had a choice in the matter, but arguing back and forth about something that could only end in one way would waste even more time. Simply put, it was illogical. So, Midoriya's eyes snapped back up to look at him. Good, he's already attentive. I said you would be documenting everything that happens while I'm principal, but that's pretty vague, all things considered. And I imagine you'd want a more detailed description of what your job is this week. Midoriya nodded so fast it seemed like his head would fly off. Shota delved into an explanation. Nezu has stated that although this position is temporary, I will be given the powers that he would have on a regular basis. Therefore, any changes I wanted to make with this school that I couldn't accomplish as a teacher is now available to me. You're not going to expel students from other classes, right? If Shota was that emotionally stable, he might have laughed at the pure seriousness in Midoriya's voice as he asked that question, but laughing would be as good as a no, and he's not so sure it's a no. It most likely won't be necessary. They both knew that wasn't an actual answer, but neither chose to acknowledge it, a smart move on his student's part. Then, what changes are you going to make? Shota gave a sadistic smile and immediately noticed how the curiosity pulling in Midoriya's green eyes quickly contorted into fearful anxiety of what was to come. The gruff teacher couldn't blame him. That's where you come in. Even more anxiety. I already have a few ideas in mind about what's wrong with UA, but I'm about 80% sure that you do too. The green-haired child began waving his arms around, attempting to cover his face like Shota and the rest of the class had seen him do so many times before. It's a common occurrence to see Midoriya panicked about something. What do you mean? The kid yelled out, way too loud for this time of day and making Shota cringe from the noise. There's nothing wrong with UA. It's amazing here. All Might is a teacher and alumni here. UA was named the #1 hero school in Japan in every ranking magazine and website, as well as best business course, support course, general education course, best cafeteria menu, best... Shota held a hand up, effectively silencing the chatterbox from spiraling into another rant. Yes, I'm well aware of the rankings UA has. But there are many factors pointing to the magazines being biased. Do you think any tabloid company would risk their reputation by stating that UA, the alma mater of the symbol of peace, is only second best? Well, Midoriya looked down, deep in thought. Another good trait. He's taking this seriously. Exactly. And while UA is no doubt worthy of its prestigious title, there are still many things that can be improved. Don't you think that saying UA isn't at its current best will lead to the school receiving public backlash? Midoriya asked, concern clouding his features and bleeding into his voice. It's a possibility, but I sincerely doubt it. By acknowledging the school's flaws, we're showing that we're open to change, Shota assured him. Change, his student muttered. The underground hero gave him a weird look. Midoriya didn't sound thoughtful when he said that. Rather a bit dreamy, if that's the right word. And Shota wondered what kind of experiences the kid must have had to say it with that kind of emotion. Midoriya quickly schooled his expression before continuing. So, I write down changes that the school could make, absolutely no limits. Once again, Shota gave him a weird look, but nodded nonetheless. Unfortunately, being principal doesn't automatically make me omnipotent, so I'll still have to discuss these decisions with the staff and the school board. It is during those meetings that your note-taking will come in handy. Midoriya nodded, determination shining in his eyes. Much like a court clerk, you'll be taking record of everything everyone says, as well as any other observations you notice about their behavior. It may seem excessive, but documenting their dialogue and reactions can help us see who disagrees and agrees, as well as giving clues as to why they feel that way. After that, we can decide the best courses of action to change their minds or change the decision in general to make a compromise of sorts. This will prevent any hypothetical backlash or outrage that will arise within the hero community. The bush-haired student finished, caught up in his own mind, and oblivious to the sleeping man in front of him. Against his will, a steady stream of pride flowed into Shota's chest for his student. He knew Midoriya's analytical abilities were exceptional for his age group. They had to be, judging by his rapid note-taking in almost every class, but this? Wow. Made him wonder why the kid didn't show this side of himself in heroics training. It was obvious to Shota that Midoriya was trying to replicate All Might's fighting style, but in reality, they were nothing alike. Of course, on the outside, they seemed like carbon copies of each other. They both had that unwavering heroic spirit. They both smiled like the sun even during the hardest of times. And they both had no sense of self-preservation. Hell, they even had similar quirks, but while All Might chose to power through things with brute force, Midoriya had the ability to devise a flawless plan and analyze every possibility for the best outcome. He just wished he would use that ability. Maybe this whole secretary thing would help him realize that. Precisely, the teacher said instead. Now, once the job starts, we won't have another break for a long time, so is there anything else you need to have with you before we get started? Yeah. I'll take my payment in the form of packs of fancy mechanical pencils, Midoriya started, causing his teacher to quirk an eyebrow in amusement. I'm also going to need, 4 more notebooks. Aizawa grinned sadistically, and for a second, the twitch of Midoriya's lips suggested he wanted to, too. Interesting. This was going to be one hell of a week. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 1 of Throw a Chair Through a Window and Call It a Day. I hope you all enjoy this fic. It's one I like to reread a lot. Let me know your thoughts and reactions, and as always, thank you so much for listening.